Three meetings happening at the same time, and this is not a normal SPAY day, is it? So I know I've got some colleagues at parish functions, so I do thank you all for finding the time and attending. I'm going to try and be as efficient with time as possible because we've got quite a large agenda. And would you like to?
Yes, and I was listening to Sharon's remarks earlier. My real concern is that we've got some very meaty items on this, and we're not going to have time to scrutinise them thoroughly. And I'm wondering whether, in fact, we can delay some of them because they do require and they merit a thorough discussion of the issues involved. I mean, for example, there is the SIL payment situation. Yep. There is the SEN, the SEN school issue. There is the changes to parking policy, all of which could, you could have an ordinary agenda where just two of those items would actually fill the agenda. And I am very concerned that we will not be scrutinising those issues as competently as we should, despite our very best efforts.
Yeah, no, and I share your thoughts, and I just had a conversation very briefly to say, to ask if any were time sensitive and any could be put back. So I'll put that question to the officers, really.
I can take one of mine, which is the Hertfordshire Development Quality Review Charter. It's not time sensitive. It's probably not the big meaty agenda items either. So it's probably, and my comment on this SIL bid for Breakspear School, it's only about that one decision for SIL, which has been a previous release to spend on Breakspear School, and it has gone to the Infrastructure Advisory Group 2 or 3 times where the scrutiny has happened. So again, that's slightly more time sensitive, but I'm happy for that to be delayed. I think the health campus is probably more important, possibly.
Chair, yes, we must keep the health campus on track, I believe, really, because that is quite critical.
Yeah, if at all possible, I'd like to keep the school on the agenda as well. So I will leave it to you, Chair, as you manage through the meeting.
Well, so am I right in thinking that the charter, which might not have taken very long, that's not time sensitive at all? So even if we just put those towards the back of the agenda and see how we get on, I share, because for me, and I want to do a proper scrutiny job as well, especially I take things very seriously being the chair for the first time. So that was one of the questions I had as well.
Just an additional comment, Chair. I would remind the previous administration that we had agendas like this when you were in administration. So this is not unusual. It's not ideal. I absolutely accept that. But I remember having 8, 9 reports on occasions at SPAY. So it is a very, very important scrutiny committee.
Clearly, then you would understand the concerns that I'm raising. I'll be very happy to see the Herts infrastructure one delayed. I would actually, for various reasons, also like to see the school, the SIL issue delayed, because with regard to our provision for children with special educational needs, I really do think that needs to be that issue where the funding has been effectively almost cut in half from SIL, does need to be thoroughly explored.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can certainly discuss that, can't we?
Well, as a compromise, if we've been able to put back item 7, so thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And if we put that at the end, just see how we get on. I do share your thoughts.
May I then suggest that we do have a guillotine at 10:30, because by 10:30 we're all going to be totally tired.
I think, is that reasonable?
Does that sound reasonable?
That's reasonable for me. It cuts off at 10:30.
I would
just carry on.
Yeah.
10 minutes talking.
Yeah. So anyway, let's move on to the agenda. So item 1, decisions and actions, pages 3 to 6. Mention those. Yes.
I noted that this is the time when I just mentioned I was there last week.
Yes.
Record my attendance, but I was there.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Apologies. So we've got apologies for Councillor Thompson. My local Oh, those that's lost. Okay. Oh, hello. So, sorry, we've got apologies. Okay. I was taking apologies for that. Okay. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest?
I'm not sure. I'm a county councillor and clearly the Silston doesn't affect the county council. So maybe it's all right, then I'm declaring an interest in that. It's a bit like we're coming to it with the
What do they better say? Any public participation? Consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to. No? So that moves us to our first problem of this, which is the services report. So the first item is the item 6, quarter 4 financial report. Is this something that we have a small presentation on, or just? Oh, yes, thank you.
This is the character for the last financial year, 2023-24, with that's March. We've done funds, 1,000, services, say, that's got a pressure of 1.3 million. Pressures related to waste services, staffing up to 100,000, and other pressures we've got pressures across a number of services, totaling 291,000. These are offset by 21,000 to budget on garden waste, reservoir uptake, and increased income in recycling of about £100,000 due to strong market rates and unsustainable we saw pressures on planning income and land searches, about £272,000. We received income of 211,000 in respect of business rates growth from Park Council for a grant. That would so use the future initiative for data and investment. The report highlights section with 24-25 with both ends, which is on treaty and I have some questions about reasons two things, and that is the cost incurred through staff, and in particular, I noticed that I wondered what to address this. What is same area is about trees. This entrance of trees which I lived was originally contracted by Hertfordshire County Council, and that now turned out that once agreements would have been foreseen, that there were little grants still left on the table to do. So it seems to me that maybe there are two areas here which been managed financially better. I do have one other issue just on the complement, which I mean I think comes up with previous council that was run. That is about the infrastructure. Because I remember you saying that there wouldn't be enough money and you had to put it up, and even then it wouldn't cover the costs of providing the service, whereas in fact you've got a surplus. So congratulate you on that, but I think I guess the benefit of the service.
It was.
First of all,
And we get to that, it's fine.
So with regards to waste, as you can myself and my team have monitored the items so that kind of the whole of the facilities. We have started effectively analysing those around I'm pleased to say that actually lots of growth and in our to manage that far strictly. So we're expecting that to be more positive in the next financial year. We do have an issue with the budget. To how high that is and how we have a so I think that can happen sickness or anything could potentially turn into pressure. I'm very so the answers weekly to the finances also have that monitor really, really bad. So we do have a strict policy now. I would like us to understand a little bit more about so far, and we managed to list the curve with some pinch points, at least some pinch points. We have touch points in terms of this, so we're always going to have that overall much stronger. Again, was made that we just have to have the finances far better now. We're reviewing prioritize work, so hopefully we'll do that again back in some to have a proper which is possible in relation to there's got to be a balance on it.
Yeah, I think my point with the trees was that there was already an agreement in place. And surely when the agreement came to an end, I'm sure I would think it was still up to council paying for that without being budgeted for. And I was feel
That agreement that was promised to us to we just didn't.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, as Councillor Palmer, I wrote to you recently about and there's a contentious issue there with regard to trees. And I'm fed up with batting requests from residents backwards and forward between between DBC and HCC that who have responsibility for these trees. And currently, I'm two up, if you like, in that DBC have acknowledged that they are finally responsible for some trees. And that has been a total waste of HCC monies, DBC monies, and officer time. And I want to know what you're going to do to address that, and whether that's covered by the remarks that. Thank you. Actually, I can't read. But it's a genuine concern about that. We're wasting officer time and everybody, all public money.
Identified been pushing to get better information so that we actually know what areas that are the core and what areas are Hertfordshire highways and also private as well. And I'm hoping that this continued review will help that. And I've also been pushing for information systems to, because other councils have had this sort of thing in place for some years, unfortunately. So that's aspect of the information is.
I don't have that geographic information because we'll have to read it later. We've got to tell us whereby, that we did not have as many people. I'm not arguing that we should go back to that.
Yeah.
It really must with the identification. Currently, my residents, if I go to HCC, that 50 times would belong or not, and then I'll pass it on to your guys. But there we go.
Yeah.
Stefania, sorry.
Sorry, it's Ian can answer this.
Yeah, I think
Particular
this is back of Chalfont Close, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that area that in question is unregistered, so it's got no owner, and that's the bit why it's been bouncing back and forward.
Exactly.
So the kind of stance that I've taken with the Trees and Woodlands team is that we will monitor it and do safety works, but that is all that we will do. So
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But one of my residents has received a letter from Trees and Woodlands, which says in fact that DBC has taken responsibility for that.
no, we haven't taken
I've
responsibility.
seen the letter.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
Is this
that,
something we can take
yeah,
offline?
we will take that offline.
Steer us.
Specific.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't go down that avenue. I was just addressing my comments to Councillor Bromley.
That noted. But I just wanted to, Robin, to respond about the green bin, the supposed surplus.
Well, I think when that was first introduced, our main concern was that it was being introduced at a very late stage, so the implementation was a very time compressed, and we were worried about the risks of that. I think was the main concern at the time. It's also identified that there were some regressive aspects in that people with big houses who used the bins a lot would be were being subsidised effectively by people who were living in flats and so on that didn't have gardens. But the progressive and regressive aspects of it kind of balanced out. So there's some people in very small houses who were having to pay the £45, now 50, where they had a tiny garden and it seemed to be a unfairly large expense for them. But what we tried to promote was bin sharing, so we encouraged residents to share bins with their neighbours. So the situation we have now is that quite a few, about 20,000 unused green bins, unfortunately. Yeah, no, it was. Yeah, we were genuinely surprised that I'm talking to a lot of residents that people seemed to be quite happy with paying the £45, and therefore increasing to £50 was generally seemed to be palatable to most residents who are paying that fee. So that's why we did it.
I think the issue was that it was always something that was made in surplus. That's why it was introduced, because other councils also charge for their green garden waste. And I think the issue was that you were very reluctant to charge people for it, which said it wouldn't work, and you wouldn't make the money on it, and it would be not make a surplus. What I'm saying is, you've succeeded, it is actually making a surplus, and people like it. And yes, you're right, some people share bins, and that seems to be perfectly fine. And I don't think it should be seen that people with bigger gardens are actually subsidising.
Fine, point noted, and just Claire Ibsen.
Yeah, can I just add, although it made a surplus to what we budgeted in terms of expected income, the service of garden waste does not make a surplus in itself, it covers its costs. There is no, it doesn't make a profit on that garden waste.
Making a surplus.
It makes a surplus on the income budget, so we set the target income very low because we expected a much smaller take-up. Although it's taken a much bigger take-up, financially it still only covers the costs of operating that service for that number of rounds.
The chair, relative to what was before when there wasn't income.
Yeah.
It is. So I think we're sort of perhaps arguing apples and pears here, Chair.
Right. Okay.
Seems to be running smoothly now.
Any other questions on the report? I had a couple of minor, but I just don't want to spend too much time on it.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Walker.
You mentioned in the report about reliability and breakdowns in the existing fleet, and it's being monitored and managed position going forward. Are these old vehicles, or because they're old vehicles, they're going to just break down more as we carry on,
They're not necessarily old vehicles, there's some newer ones where we've had issues with bin lifts and things, so we're having to sort of retrofit and improve the fitments within to improve the flooring, so they've reduced the breakdowns.
There were quite a few issues with the introduction of the current fleet of bin lorries, which are still quite new. So they were the ones that we purchased were sort of twin lift, and there's been a lot of reliability issues. And also the probably wasn't good enough vetting of the supplier, who has gone out of business, and there's been a lot of struggle to get spare parts for those trucks. And they have been going into an upgrade programme where you get taken off every month.
So this isn't the manufacturer of the truck itself, it's an add-on put on the truck by another manufacturer?
Well, there's three components to the truck. There's the chassis, which is Mercedes, and there's the hopper, and then there's the bin lifter bit on the back. And so it's not the chassis, it's the other parts which are...
We've got no redress against Mercedes, it's the people who manufacture the bit at the back that lifts it up and down. That's the problem.
Yeah, and the ones who integrate it. I don't know the detail.
We'll have to know a bit more about that sometime.
Chair, I well remember having the role a few years back.
Can we have one meeting, please? Yeah, Councillor Wyatt's low, please. Can we have one conversation, please?
I remember having the role a few years back when we got into a situation where the manufacturers of the winch on the back of the vehicle blamed the manufacturer of the bins for not making them strong enough. And the manufacturer of the bin blamed the manufacturer of the winch on the back of the vehicle for not being appropriate for the job it was trying to do.
Well, we've got a defective batch of bins, apparently, which was split down.
You'll always get caught between a rock and a hard place with different manufacturers arguing with each other.
But looking forward, what I've asked the officers to investigate is, rather than the twin lift, which has got all these complexities, to have separate food collection to the mixed waste and residual.
The question I wanted to ask,
I'm concerned, based on our initial concerns about time, that we are really talking, spent a long time on a minor part of the report, but please sum up, Councillor Hanson.
Question, Chair, and this might be something for officers to take away for another time, because it's getting very detailed. I've noticed, living in a rural location, that animals are actually eating the curbside caddies for food rubbish. They're actually eating through the plastic to get into them.
Yeah.
I've had to order 2 replacements in the last 12 months and try to find ways to stop it happening. I just wonder if that's just me, or whether we have actually got evidence of that happening in the rural locations across the borough, and there's some issues.
Is this any relevance to this report?
Well, I'm talking about the costs, because one of the costs here was mentioned, the overspend on refuse. refuse bins, Chair.
And it's a really interesting point, and it's not something I've heard about, so, yeah.
We can take it as an offside query, and then we can send you that.
30 seconds, Chair, that's all it took.
Yeah, but maybe 30 seconds we haven't got, but thank you. Any other questions in any part of the report that was that was sent to us? No? Okay. No, fine. The only one question, I'll be very quick, 5.1, and it may just be a matter of my inexperience. It mentions money moving to SANG reserves. Is that just a procedural thing?
Yeah. So we collect SANG
Yeah.
from developers, and we have to spend it on ring-fenced items. So what we haven't spent, we have to move into reserves.
Fine, so the spending will be another process. That's absolutely fine. I do believe with my helpful assistant that we're going to move on to health straight away. Is that right? So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's page 36.
36, thank you. Now, will we have a presentation of the health or I'm happy to summarise what I think our objectives are.
Chair, there's no presentation, but I'll take members through the report briefly, and Diane and I are here to answer questions.
Fine, and just for, I'm hoping I'm helping. Am I right in thinking the objectives this evening is not to talk in detail about the health campus? Is it to make a decision on whether we think it's right for a feasibility study? Is that my understanding?
It's more. Yes, it's more, Chair, to scrutinise the proposals we're putting in front of members for the next stages of the project, basically, rather than the project itself, if that makes sense.
Fine.
As set out in the report. So there is a project initiation document here to move it on to the next phases. Members might want to have a comment about what that contains and the costs that we'll be asking Cabinet to fund at its next meeting.
No, fine. And hope, this may, I hope, help other councillors in the room. I have a number of questions. Because I don't think they're appropriate at this stage. The next stage will still be display of the business. So, will that help with a summary or?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So the report in front of you, members, is this project. Just a reminder about the project is about to take forward an integrated health and wellbeing campus on the Market Square in Hemel. Again, just as a reminder for members that the council distributes NHS partners the Arts Teaching Hospitals Trust on behalf of West Essex Board jointly funded a piece of feasibility work to look at handles for whether it should move to an excellent series more in-depth stage. That report came back positive, and members may remember I hosted a presentation for all members of the council last year. So the council officers and the health partners have been meeting since then to set out the next stages of the project, and what you have in front of you are the proposals for moving to that next stage. Again, just a reminder of what the facility would deal with. The feasibility study from 2023 looked at modelling a scenario where you put in the clinical services from the current hospital site, the community and mental health services from the Marlows Health Centre, just a little way across from this building, and also to make some provision for GP services modelled on a relocation of Fernville GP practice all into one location. So the benefits, of course, for that ostensibly are to consolidate all health and wellbeing facilities under one roof into one easily accessible and hopefully attractive campus. It will, of course, resolve the issue of the regeneration of the Market Square and provide also the opportunity, we'd like to explore this in the next stages of the study, Chair, the opportunity for some further regeneration within the area beyond just health. So we know this is part of the town centre that is in need of regeneration. And then with that, we have attendant benefits of driving footfall in the town centre, which the town needs. And in turn, it would free up the current hospital site at Hillfield Road for housing redevelopment and delivery of a primary school, which features as part of the local plan proposals. So you have in front of you the report with the project initiation document, or PID, which is Appendix 2. The report is saying that we think the collective view of the officers from ourselves and the NHS purposes, the next page in the original part. So there is agreement in principle to for each organisation to contribute a further so it comes to approximately 67,000. So that is the decision that this council will be used to make next week. Waiting on me for the 3rd. For a bit of contingency in our account, there's a drawdown from residents to actually do that. Now that work, you can see is set out in the PID. It includes the money would pay for a program manager or project manager to lead this from partners and budget for program consultancy. And if you look through the report, section 10 indicates the source of consensus. We would need section 5 that summarises the PID. There is a governance that's been worked out around this, and that's at section 8 of your report, members, and there is a diagram that show how they manage perspective. And the proposal will be is that once concluded, then the partners will work at pace for roughly the next 12 months to move it through the first of the NHS's 3 business planning stages. So this is to take us through our strategic outline case of the project. Next steps with this is that a similar, if not the same report, we're going to Health and Wellbeing Committee on Thursday of this week. The Hospitals Trust have been asked to attend that to answer members' questions. It will then move on to Cabinet for the meeting on the 23rd next week. Our other 2 partners here have yet to confirm exactly when they're reporting through there, but we are meeting with them when they're doing that. In the meantime, the collective officer team from the organisations is making background preparations for our work. So we're doing some work with the trust environment around things like job descriptions, some of the consultants to explore the right skills that we need to take. So I'll just there. I've said quite a lot already, and then we're very happy to. Thank you. We'll start with Councillor Timmis.
When we saw the what domain has the access on and so on. Now, by its nature, it's catering for a particular demographic in particular, and those people are going to need, I would suggest, to be able to park nearby. And I think the original idea was to park in the car parks down here, which are not exactly next to, immediately by them. So that was one thing. The other thing is about the impact this will have, depending on how comprehensive this is, on primary care facilities and other parts of decorum, and whether this therefore takes up, shall we say, more of the financial support from the I also feel that this isn't a waste of the site that we already have, and whether, because that already has parking and facilities, maybe uploaded. And I'm just wondering about, it's a lovely idea, and it looks good and it looks smart. I'm just wondering whether, the finance seems to make a lot of sense to start building something brand new. Got something that works well. And certainly the parking there means you can park literally near the door and walk in, or wheelchairs. So I actually, those are my questions.
Thank you, Chair. If I start, and I'm sure Diane would like to add as well. So thank you, Councillor Timmis. Yeah, some really good questions there, actually. So I think on the issue of access to parking to start with, I mean, the pictures, the drawings that members saw a few months ago, they were literally particularly sort of perspective drawings where artists and physicians which the scientific commission. So things like the detailed voters for things like ambulance treatment or even any on-site parking, we would expect this next stage of work to look at. That said, of course, the site is quite constrained because it's huge, so it's never going to make a huge amount of parking. I think the key thing that the next study does need to look into is actually about the availability of parking through the adjacent Water Gardens car parks and of course the NCP as well. So they're very close to public car parks and whether to improve access to the site itself, so people getting out of their cars and then moving into the campus for their visits, their treatment, whatever, about whether there are any off-site improvements. For example, would you want to consider, or should it be considered to have some sort of level sort of crossing access across Waterhouse Street, which is an idea that we have looked at as part of the town centre vision. So that's yet to be resolved, I think, but the site is focus. In terms of the financial question, I think that's probably more a question for the NHS. I think probably all we can say, and Representative like bring Diane to add is that there is backing for this from both the Hospitals Trust and the ICB. It will be up to them how they then manage the other throughout the borough, but it is seeking to almost like relocate what we have at the current hospital site into there. So I don't think we know the full answer to that at the moment. Maybe one that we'll have to pick up. But Diana, I don't know if you can add anything to that at all.
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, yeah, as James said, this is driven and in agreement with the ICB and the Hospital Trust in terms of the relocation and the reprovision within the town centre to keep it accessible to all. With regards to parking, what I would just add to what James has already said, he mentioned the previous report and study was high level, and in comparison to the detail that will be undertaken as part of this next stage, it was very high level and a relatively small commission, although we did get some extensive information out of it. So all of those considerations, final occupancy and all of that financial modelling will be part of this next stage feasibility to inform a business case to take forward or not by all parties. So the first commission was designed to be high level to see whether or not a solution was workable on there that merited a next stage of this level of detailed investigation and feasibility. And there's a whole number of things that we factored in that weren't necessarily gone into in any detail to inform the next stage, such as kind of like all the environmental impacts and the drainage and the utilities and everything else that you would expect to see at this stage. And the NHS, sorry, Charles, the NHS has got a very particular, if you're not familiar, forgive me if you are, but a very particular business case and approval and governance process. So the requirements of this feasibility matches what they need to take it through the their governance process as well as ourselves. And there will be a number of boards, and hopefully you can see from the reports and the appendices to the project initiation document, there is a lot of governance attached to this, both jointly with partners, with other NHS bodies that aren't the key partners, the ICB and the Trust, but also we'll have our own internal governance boards and governance routes as well. So all of these questions will be factored in and answered at appropriate stages through the project, and key milestones that decision making in terms of progressing will take place.
Okay, we have got sorry.
I just follow that with two things. One about parking. The parking with patients, and I've worked in hospitals and everything else, parking is their number one concern for most people. I know that we're trying to get everyone into bicycles and so on, but the majority of people coming into medical facilities, parking is the number one issue, and I do think that needs to be really thought out. And secondly, the issue that you were mentioning about this all coming, and I hope that we will be able to scrutinise that, because the NHS have, as we know, with the West Task Hospital and that kind of stuff, they have the ability just to overload them.
This next step is, and to be honest, everything you learn is it's really interesting to hear so that that system and make sure that those are realistic.
James responded that we've got committee over possible just very briefly on that. We would expect members from there'll be a series of milestones in there, so there'll be decision making.
So they need to be worked out, but what I expect, Chair, is that there'll be points at which we'll need to come back to this committee and to the Health and Wellbeing Committee as well, to so members can scrutinise and we can take members' views on those as they move forward. Just one further point about our engagement with this, of course, that by being a 1/3 partner with this, by putting in this, well, possibly up to 200,000 into this, it gives us an equal seat at the table, basically. And of course, it's the council's land as well, so we would have the benefit of landowner control as well. But I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Link.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask at this stage, is the land for this health campus absolutely set in stone? And have you considered other viable sites for this? And if you haven't, why not?
So I think we can deal with this quite straight. I mean, to be very clear about this, the project is about delivering the facility on the Market Square specifically. We do understand that the NHS need to include within their governance and their review here a review of other sites. Now, that work has been done in the past, Chairman, from other studies as well. They may want to revisit that a bit, because it will be effectively their investment moving forward to actually build the new facility. So I expect there will be a further piece of work to come on this. But I just wanted to take members back to one reason for the council's involvement in this is it brings those other regeneration town centre benefits to it through the new developments on the Market Square as well. But of course, should they make a further decision down the line, we'll work with them on that. We've worked with them in the past on.
So can I just come back and ask if they're going to do a feasibility study of other sites? For example, I would suggest some Maylands, because it's an industrial area coming just off the M1, and perhaps they could do a shuttle. The parking in the town is already strained, and I believe if you add to that parking, regardless of your revenue, you're actually going to put a strain and a frustration on the residents. They're going to lose faith in the council, and we're going to get it in the neck as councillors, if I'm honest. And we're going to have to go back to residents and tell them why it was decided that that campus should be put there. I understand your financial gains, but to be honest with you, it needs to be feasible, and if people can't park and people can't access it and it's putting a strain on the already strained town centre, there's no chance. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, really on about this, but we talk about parking for patients and carers, staff as well. I mean, the fact is that staff can have to park somewhere if they work in that building, and we've already lost a section of Water Gardens car park, which is now connected to this building, and there are times of the day when I come to Hemel you cannot park in Water Gardens. So I almost keen to say you don't need an extensive report to work out the parking. Just walk round the area at certain times of the day and see or think how on earth you'd actually make that work. You don't need to have 1,000, hundreds of pages. It just, the parking isn't there, I don't think, to run it satisfactorily. If you can't run it satisfactorily, you'll build something which can't be used properly.
Yeah, if you don't mind me chipping in, would parking be part of the feasibility report?
Has to be.
Yes.
They'll be included?
Has to be.
Okay.
Yes. Has to be.
Yes.
Fine. Well, I have similar concerns, and I'll look forward to reading about that in the feasibility. Okay.
It's a big problem.
Okay. Thank you. I think it was Councillor Anderson. Councillor Anderson, Councillor Mitchell.
Chair, I support the principle of the health council campus, but I do share slight concerns about how appropriate the site is. And one, I would hope that one could retain a holistic approach, because if they went through this whole process, identified the car parks as being available for car parking, only to find that the water garden car parks have been developed into a school, then one would be stuck. And as has been very eloquently put, the councillors would get it in the neck. But the question I really wanted to ask was, with the previous proposals for this site, land assembly has always been an issue because of the various landowners down each side of the market square. And it's been a really difficult, thorny problem. So at what stage through this process would that be considered?
Yes, really good question, Councillor Anderson, thank you. Yes, so the simple answer to that is through this stage as well. Just so everyone is clear, the remit that our consultants last year were given was to see what could they deliver within the council's demise. Just so everyone is clear around the table, the demise the council has is the old market area and the bus station area. The bungalow shops either side of the square are privately owned in a variety of ownerships, and Councillor Walker's nodding there as well from his own previous experience in his profession. But they're privately owned, and things like the pub on the side and so on, that they are privately owned as well. What I think we need to do through this is to explore whether you get a better product for the place by taking in some of those third-party assets into the scheme, and that might give the opportunity for some further. When I say commercial development, Chair, I don't just mean business space. It may mean some housing as well as part of a mixed-use development, but it'll be health driving it effectively.
Okay. If you don't mind me chipping in, because that was one of my questions.
Oh, apologies, Chair.
No, that's fine.
I've been Blackpool twice in one night.
No, you're certainly not. But my if you don't mind me, reminding everyone the state of Hemel Town Centre and the amount of closures we've got, which I walked around myself counting, which was nearly a third, and to lose all those businesses that along each side, adding to that without no plan on rehoming or rehousing really concerned me. I know we're looking at that surrounding report, but I guess let's wait until I share your concerns, and let's wait and see what the feasibility report says about that, I guess. We've got Councillor Mitchell, who's been very patient, and Councillor Doris, and I'll come back to Councillor Whitelow.
I guess it's really just similar input, but with something as important as the closure of Hemel Hempstead Hospital, which is how people will see it going forward, we need to know. I would have liked to have seen alternative options. I wouldn't have liked just one option on the table. I would have liked to have considered more, and I'm just wondering if the Trust has given any advice on, if this isn't successful, the feasibility study, what they will plan to do going forward for NHS services in Hemel Hempstead. And also, the Labour group has concerns about the constraints of the site because of the size of the site. We would like all existing services moved, but we'd also like additional services. We're looking to grow the NHS services in Hemel Hempstead and not have them constrained by site size.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. A couple of things I can say. There was a study done of the hospital site redevelopment around about 2016, 2017, which looked at providing some housing there, but losing some of the older buildings there and reconfiguring the hospital there in that location. Now, the NHS didn't act on that at the time, but the Borough Council, the County Council, were for some partners into that, and we put our input into that to make sure we're getting the right sort of outcome for the town and the borough if the NHS went down that route. The second point is that the NHS have already obtained planning permission for the potential consolidation of their services into the Verulam wing there. So there was a very modest, I think, Sarah, wasn't it, planning application they had to put in just to make some adjustments to that building. So that is an option for them. But whether they've looked at other sites or not, we couldn't say at the moment.
Can I ask James how that would compare in terms of size?
We'd have to take that one away, I'm afraid, Chair, to have a look for that. The details are all on our planning website, but we need to look at that. But the thinking's moved on since then in terms of looking at the Market Square.
Okay, thanks for the question. Councillor Doris.
Thank you. The question of unintended consequences that really picks up your last comment. with regard to parking very briefly, and that is, I do have a concern potentially that if you are using most of the car parking spaces for the health hub and existing businesses, if you expand that in busy times, we're not going to have enough parking for people coming into the town centre to purchase things or be customers of the existing premises in the town centre, and that may have a detrimental effect on the existing property businesses, possibly. Couple of questions, one relating to paragraph 6.2.3 that talks about the disposal of surplus assets. I'm assuming that you're talking about the existing hospital site, and if you are, where would the beneficial assets funding come to? Would they be assimilated into the West Herts Hospital project of 1.2 billion, or would they come to where? That's the question. And the third one, which is a very simple question, is within the project, and forgive my ignorance, but does it include the bus station area?
Could I take those in reverse order, Chair, actually? So, sorry, Councillor, is the bus station, it has the old bus station, the bit that joins onto Waterhouse Street. Yes, so yes, it does, yes. It's that full extent. So the council's ownership is effectively from the Marlows on the east all the way to Waterhouse Street it's all the open area basically, but not the building. So it's that one. On the issue of the disposal of assets, we don't know the answer to that at the moment, but the thinking behind this was to get commitment from the three partners, the Borough Council and the two NHS bodies, to look at the deployment of their assets without agreeing anything at the time, because there will be, I'm sure, a very complex state of sort of valuations to be gone through as to what actually happens. I suspect the issue is going to be more about the actual cost of building the new facility and how that is funded, which is something that the NHS partners are actually looking into. But I think that's probably a point we would need to take away for our partners and have them address that through at least this next stage of the project. But I suspect that any value of the assets will easily be subsumed by the actual cost of the build of the new facility.
Can I come back very briefly on that? Because I think it does open up a question that needs answering and needs publicly answering, insofar as my recollection is that as it was then, I think it was £900 million rather than 1.2 billion for the West Herts Hospital. That was going to be divided between the three sites, namely Watford General, St Albans and Hemel Hempstead. And it allowed for the refurbishment of the existing Hemel Hempstead Hospital. If you'll probably remember, because you go back as long as I do, that was probably about 3 years ago. But I don't know that it's necessarily been changed in the latest iteration. So I think we need to be aware that we're not being asked to chip into something which is already either being funded, and I'm led to believe that the Health Hub is being funded from an entirely separate pot to that which applies to the West Herts Hospital Trust. So I think all of those things added up give me a little bit of cause for questioning further.
Yeah. But based on this is just to give the go-ahead for the feasibility study. Let's hope we get all those answers in the future.
Well, you only get the answers if you ask questions.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that will be the output. That today is about are we going to spend some money on 167 or 200 on towards a feasibility study?
Yes.
And a lot of these will be answered. Well, I hope and expect.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really good point. That is what the decision and the question and the next phase of work isn't about building the health campus. It is just about this feasibility, and as in the project initiation document as well. That does also include looking at different funding options, different delivery models, the ongoing costs of the facility for the health colleagues. So that is what this next stage of feasibility will look at. How will it be funded to enable everybody to make decisions around do we move forward or not after that point.
Councillor Whitelow. And hopefully we could wrap up after this.
I'd like to turn to page 41, which is 11 next steps, and 12, which is options. And if you look at the options, there are two. One is to agree the approach and recommendations as set out in the reports, and and that is a recommended option. And the other one is not agreeing to the approach and the recommendations set out in the report. And it's very clear from the comments that have been made that people have genuine reservations about progressing this when there are serious questions raised about the parking provision for the facility itself. And so I would not be happy to agree the recommendations as set out in this report, because nowhere does it address those concerns, and that's been across the board about the parking issue, and that should be reflected somewhere in this document or in what this committee recommends.
But I hope I have understood your question correctly, but this is all about what the feasibility study will provide. So our objective this evening is just to give approval for the study to answer all those important questions.
If I may add, that earlier on, we were told that £250,000 was being drawn down from reserves for the feasibility study. And I would be concerned about whether that money, in fact, was being wasted if we are not doing the very basic steps about, at this stage, about whether there is sufficient parking for the project. I'm certainly not averse to the fact that the NHS wants to invest money in health in this town. Absolutely, that's not what my concern is. But if they are going to do it, then it has to be fit for purpose. It has to be accessible. And if you're seeking to regenerate the town centre on the back of it, we still then need parking provision. And if you are then expanding the parking needs, then you're almost cancelling out the benefit of one.
But but without a feasibility study, how would we be able to answer those questions?
I think the fact, all right, I would like to have something added onto this that said the committee itself has very genuine concerns about the parking provision for what is being proposed, and that this should be addressed as part of the feasibility study, not just as an add-on, but it's an integral part of whether this project is successful, in my view.
Chair, if I may. Just
Okay, I've got.
And then I think James and Diane want to make
James and then
Anson. Councillor Whitelow, absolutely, we've heard the comments made, and as the chair has already said, the whole point of the feasibility study is to address all these issues. The alternative is that we as a council spend £200,000 just looking at parking, and that would be a waste of money. No, I'm not suggesting, but that we have thought about this. We have thought about it, I promise you. So that would be the only alternative. So it makes far more sense for us to allow for our input with our partners that will look at this and all the other issues, because I'm sure you've all read the report. There's a lot of things we need to consider as part of this feasibility study. And although I absolutely accept your concerns around parking, that's not the only major issue we need to consider about. And I think one of the things when we're talking about the commerciality and the input to the centre of Hemel, as we all know, Hemel has been suffering for a long time now. We've had conversations in these Bay meetings saying, what are we going to do about Hemel Town Centre? How are we going to drive people into Hemel Town Centre? How are we going to get footfall into Hemel Town Centre? So that's why it's part of this whole regeneration process as well, which when you layer it on top of the Hemel Place strategy, the draft local plan and all these other issues, they all interlock, and that has to be part of the feasibility study as well. We need to consider the commercial aspects, all these aspects, if we're going to include the other surrounding shops, the pubs, whether there's going to be retail space, whether there's going to be living space. So that's why this feasibility study is so absolutely essential, because then the officers come back to you. Because basically what we have at the moment is a skeleton, isn't it? That's the point you're making. We've got a very gappy skeleton and nobody knows where the flesh is. So what the feasibility study will do, we'll put all the flesh on that and we can really start to pick apart these sort of issues. So I absolutely agree with Councillor Whitelow, if we could please, officers, Chair, include a section to specify about parking. I think that's a very good point. Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James, did you want to add?
Only just to sort of take members back to the recommendation on page 36, really, which invites you to note the report, but also to provide any comments. So I think we've heard that.
Oh, bless you, sorry. I'm going to give you a red buzzer if I'm chairing again, and you can buzz me.
Purely to go back to the recommendation, that members note the report and the comments that have been made, all the comments made in the committee are taken into account, including but not only how parking can be provided.
I'll be very happy with that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. Last question?
Yeah, it's not even a question really, and it's non-contentious, so hopefully it'll be all right, it's very quick. It's just about, I'm sure this was mentioned at the original briefing about noting about the memorial tree and that's considered going forward, but also as a market, that's been very important to, as it was a market for many years, for many people in this town. Lots of people miss the market and the vibrancy that brought to Hemel, and if in some way there could be some form of memorial to that and the traders that worked there for many, many years.
Yeah. You know what, I worked on that market for many years as well, 13, but oh no. Okay.
I remember you well.
That was me. That was me.
Do tell us later.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your questions and your patience. I'm learning very quickly. So, what?
Agreed.
What item on the agenda are we going to deal with next? Is it? Are we keeping to the agenda or?
We just need to vote to agree to go forward, yeah, just with the recommendations, yeah.
It's just to note,
Just
Councillor.
to note the comments.
Yeah, so I thought I thought we were going to have a vote, but it was rightly pointed out by a couple of people after the event that it was just making additional comments to cabinet.
All we can do is to say agreed as usual.
It says members note the report and provide any comments to cabinet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you ask us if we agree with the
So do you agree with the report with those additional comments?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Right, so going back to the agenda. What page is it on the agenda? So, which item would you prefer to look at next? Item 9? Okay. So I've been told that because we were okay on 1, 2, we've moved one back, so we've got 2 more items and for a couple of hours. So I'm confident that we should be able to cover both of those. Agreed? So.
The 10:30 was an absolute cut-off, not something we're aiming for.
Oh, no, I don't want to do that either. But I'm with you. You have my support. So, page 65. And will we get an introduction? Sarah?
Yeah.
Marvellous, thank you very much.
Okay, I'll be very brief in my introduction because I think the report explains most items. This is a report, it's a still bid that's been submitted by Hertfordshire County Council for money for Breakspear School. So paragraph 2.4 shows that, as you'd all agree, careful consideration needs to be given to the amount of SIL that's allocated and the overall strategic allocation of community infrastructure levy. The beginning of the report just sets out the reminders in terms of the total amount of SIL and how much has then been agreed to be released, which is 20% of the core SIL. So at paragraph 2.5, you can see that that's just over 3 million that the council previously in February 2023 agreed in principle that we should start spending up to £3 million. They did agree in February 2023 at committees that 100,000 could go to playgrounds. And then you can see more recently in May 2024, the Infrastructure Advisory Group, who actually go through the bids to the SIL, agreed a reduced bid of 1.3 or 1.4 million. So just to give you a bit of background, the bid itself is for the enlargement of Breakspear School. The school at the moment, it would move from Abbots Langley into Croxley Green, and that would allow an increase of the school from about an additional 113 places. So at the moment, there's 97 places, and this would go up to 210 places. The whole new school cost would be approximately 35 million, and Herts County Council have agreed They will be going forward with the project. It's needed for a variety of reasons, and really kind of now they're looking at preparing their planning applications. So you can see as well that other local authorities have been asked to contribute, either via Section 106 for St Albans, and Hertfordshire, Three Rivers and Watford are included in the table at paragraph 3.4, and the various amounts that they have been asked to contribute. This has been to the Infrastructure Advisory Group a few times, and in February 2023, August 2023, and then more recently in May. So the considerations that went through from February to August, very much in principle agreement to the a request of SIL funds, but concern about the amount, and that would wipe out the amount of SIL that was available for spend at this particular time. Concern as well that in terms of the way that amount had been calculated, if there was any peaks and troughs in the growth, that may have disproportionately reflected a peak in growth at a particular time when this was calculated around 2015. And generally just that awareness that in terms of the amount collected, it's going to go nowhere near to meeting all of our infrastructure needs, and making sure that any spend was kind of fully considered with the wide variety of strategic needs that the borough has. Also questions about the Herts County Council existing sites and what might happen to that, so just from the broader project point of view. So in terms of now going forward, the key item that has changed, officers undertook to go back and look at the methodology as the way that the amount had been calculated. So the original bid was around 2.6 million. And looking at the way that had been calculated, Herts County Council had taken housing completions from July 2015, as this was the date that Decorum had started charging for SIL. However, there was a number of housing completions in that time that had been calculated that actually didn't collect any SIL. So that would be for a variety of reasons in terms of the size of the proposals, etc. So taking those back out, then that got up to the new figure of 1,364,000. So this resulted in that revised figure. So I think in May 2024, the Infrastructure Advisory Group agreed that that would be an amount that they would support, and the school kind of contribution to go ahead then to this scrutiny, and then go ahead to Cabinet next week on the 23rd of July to be able to release that money. The total fund of the school will be met by Herts County Council. So in terms of the question about what if the SIL contribution, is reduced, what impact that will have on the overall kind of position and funding of the school, it would mean that the amount of borrowing from Herts County Council would be increased. So I think they're the main points to take you through, and happy to take any questions.
A big question for me is that using calls. I guess you need a little more time on that. I do believe I read in a note somewhere that based on the process, I think now I can guarantee in the future that the core children will be given positions in that school course. Because see a lot of money for me based on what the other districts are making contributions for. So that's just artistic purpose, and that's the only little bit of question that I need to spend a bit more time on.
Okay, so just to answer those, I'm not an education specialist, but I will do my best in terms of the papers submitted for the bid. So there's 3 special education needs schools across southwest Hertfordshire, and from those 3 in 2022, 2021, actually, they were all full. So Woodfield, Watling View, and then Breakspear. Hence the need from education planning point of view to go ahead and re-provide with a bigger kind of amount of capacity. In terms of the way that children are allocated places in these schools, it's not a geographical positioning, it's very much done via a board to be able to know where the need is. So whether it's in Croxley Green or Abbots Langley, both of those are in Three Rivers and actually will have Decorum kind of pupils. Same as it's kind of boundary neutral from that positioning. It's more of a wider geography of southwest Hertfordshire rather than a local authority geography in that small positioning. At the time that this kind of report was written, I think there was something like 25 kind of, pupils that needed special education need places, and some of those were in mainstream education, some of those had gone into the kind of the Breakspear school and other schools. But there was that point there that the need had outstripped demand at that point. So there was a need for decorum residents to be placed and there was no capacity for placing them. I imagine dramatically that the data was 2021, so it's quite out of date. So 2024, I think the special education needs have kind of increased, and that will be for decorum and all of South West Hertfordshire wide. So it's a neutral positioning in terms of being able to allow pupils going through it will be done on a needs-based rather than a where do you live based.
Okay, I'll have one follow-up question and I'll go to Councillor Anderson. But I'm already thinking when they, and this may be untrue, but more people that have legal help get these places with the boards, and less so-called families that may not be able to afford legal advice do not. Is that a myth, or?
I probably can't comment in a level of detail. I'll go through the papers, but I know that the boards are very much where the decisions are based. What you're referring to might just be preparation to those boards, but I think at the moment, in terms of the positioning of Herts County Council, they would very much be building a school that has the opportunity for everybody to be able to apply for it who needs that opportunity. There's nothing around budgets or, you know, kind of backgrounds, etc., or any kind of means testing that then goes through to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You've actually put your finger right on when this was first put to the IAG, which I chaired. You've put your finger right on the concern we had in how far away the school was from decorum, and it was a very, very difficult balancing act on the decision. Now, I think you have to balance that against the fact you've got a fabulous cause, and it was a difficult one. To my mind, what resolved it for me was that if you think about how SIL is collected and its purposes, we're collecting SIL for the county council to spend on the causes that it thinks it needs the infrastructure funding for. And if the county council's come to us and said it's got this particular need that stretches across different authority boundaries, then it's for them to say that. And that's, for me, that's what got me over that barrier. But I did share that particular concern. Again, the second time tonight, the question I really want to ask though is, okay, so we've reduced the funding by half because the calculations weren't right in the first place. My big concern is what's happened to the other half, because there were other projects the IAG was considering from the kick-off, from the start. For example, putting a pedestrian crossing in a dual carriageway, which I had real issues over. And I noticed that a press release had been put out that work's about to start. My big concern is whether that 1.3 million saved from this has gone on that, because that I had a really big issue with, Chair.
So I can confirm that this is the second SIL proposal that's gone forward to a scrutiny. So the first being around the playgrounds for the 610,000. Yeah. The other items that you may remember from previous IAGs have not been taken forward at this stage for a variety of reasons. The projects may well have been funded via different revenue streams to be able to then kind of allow them to go forward.
Not via this. Thank you for that, Chair.
Okay, we've got the crossing. Thank you. Councillor Gale.
Okay, so after reading the report, it suggested the funding, as people have said, have been cut by half, and there's a relocation of the SEN school. Just for background, I've worked as an educator, both privately and in secondary schools in the past, and peripatetic teaching. So my question is, if you're relocating schools, do we have a healthy budget to transport these children that need to go out of county or out of their area? That is my question. Do we have the money to do that?
That's Herts.
The statutory
Herts County Council.
Yeah, absolutely. The
but aren't we
statutory
responsible for Crocs leaving at Three Rivers? No. Am I reading it wrong? So I'm substituting, sorry.
The statutory requirements are Hertfordshire County Council, so it's their responsibility to be able to do exactly what you've just said in terms of
transport and nothing to do with us.
Absolutely, and so is education and place planning.
That
so they
answers my
would have gone
question.
through all of that due diligence, and now the request is, can you help us support it?
Just in terms of, Mum have said, so you make an application to HCC.
Yeah. And I actually brought this up in the IAG and yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Transport, it's not our responsibility, it's.
No, that's fine. Thank you, councillor Wilkie.
Councillor Gow.
Yes, can you just help me with how the figures of the contributions from each of the boroughs are calculated?
They're all calculated on their SIL basis and for houses that have been built from April 2015 through to a point in time which was 2021, September 2021. So they have then kind of taken the amount of homes, so you can see in the table at paragraph 3.4.
Yes.
So Hertfordshire 767 homes compared to us where we were delivering 1,778 homes at the same point in time, the same period, and then calculating the amount of SIL that would then require. So I think where we found it challenging was the fact that actually it included all housing completions, not just housing completions that attracted SIL. And that's the main difference that we've then re-collaborated the amount.
I'm just trying to work out the logical basis for the amount of contribution to the SEN school depends on the number of houses that are built. Yeah. And the logical connection between the two is the idea that because we've built more houses, we're likely to have more need. Absolutely. For the school. That's the I see how it works. Okay.
Not every house will generate a SEND need, but there'll be a sort of an average that I'm sure they'll work out.
Okay. I've got a question. It might be my naivety with process and county councils, how they work. And I'm, very supportive of the local plan, but I was, any SIL money, I was hoping and expecting that would improve decorum. Is that not necessarily there for a guarantee? Or?
So you can see at paragraph 1.3, in terms of the SIL money, 5% goes to administration of SIL, 15% or 25% goes to neighbourhoods, and that 80% is core fund. That core fund has a lot of strategic infrastructure requirements, some of which are responsibility of us as a district authority, some other responsibility of Herts County Council as a unitary authority. So education, transport, anything around kind of flooding, etc., is around the Herts County Council level.
Okay.
And very important for our decorum Borough Council residents.
Right, okay.
But not our responsibility. So yes, out of that 80%, it is within our gift how much goes forward to a Herts County Council, but you can tell with the difference of responsibilities we have, much that they look at on their responsibilities is very much the kind of key kind of items that we want to be able to kind of look to our communities to support.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. I think I did have Councillor Morgan, would you? Oh, sorry. Councillor Gowling, Councillor Doris, and then Councillor Mitchell.
Just briefly, what impact does this SIL contribution have on our overall SIL budget?
So now the reprofiled amount, you can see again at paragraph 1.3, our SIL balance is just under 19.5 million. So in terms of taking this forward, this would be, a dent to the tune of kind of 1.4 million or just under, roughly, to be able to kind of look to that point.
Councillor Doris.
You want to go after Councillor Mitchell?
Thank you, you're a gent.
Yeah, it's just for an information thing that myself and my colleague Councillor Pete Hannell, are going to St Luke's tomorrow, which is St School, and they're having a cream tea afternoon. So if anybody was interested, I'm sure they'd welcome more councillors if you'd like to attend. I think it's organised by a Blue Tangerine. I've got the contact details if anybody would like it.
Marvellous. I'll chat to you after about that. Thank you. Councillor Doris.
I have to declare an interest insofar as I was the Cabinet Member for Education at Hertfordshire County Council when the proposed move on the relocation of Ratespear School from its current position in Abbots Langley to a Hertfordshire County Council owned site on the site of the old Durrance playing fields in Croxley Green was mooted. And it recognised the fact that we needed additional educational space for young people with special educational needs. To put that into some level of perspective, over the last 6 years or so, the number of children in Hertfordshire with educational healthcare plans has risen from approximately 3,500 to something in the order of 12,000. And those SEN children, they are not restricted to any geographical boundary. And to answer the point that you made earlier on, about people with more money being able to get their children into special needs schools, it is fact that some people do go to appeal and tribunal. That is not based on their propensity to pay. It's based very largely and very often on their support networks that they have that allow them to make appeals. And it's also a fact that a good proportion of them actually do win. Full stop. To answer and to reiterate what Sarah said about school transport goes with the child. It's the responsibility of Hertfordshire County Council. And the placement of children is based not on their geographic location, but on their need and the suitability of a school to meet their need. So that you may find that you will have potentially, although it's unlikely, a larger proportion of children in 1 year from Hertfordshire as opposed to Dacorum. On another year, you may find a larger proportion of children from Dacorum than Hertfordshire or Three Rivers, even though it's in Three Rivers site. It's based on the need of the child, and I would passionately ask you to agree. In fact, to be perfectly honest, bearing in mind that you're sitting on very nearly £20 million of unspent SIL money, I would passionately ask you to actually not give 1,391,000 or thereabouts, but to actually give the original amount which was requested, which was I think about 2.27 million, something in that order, because it is needed. And all that will happen if you don't is that Hertfordshire County Council will have to borrow that different money or that excess money, and they have to pay interest charges on it. So we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, where you've got all this money, or we've got all this money sitting there in the bank waiting to be spent on infrastructure projects. So that would be my plea. If you don't accept my super plea, I just hope that you will accept the recommendation at the very minimum, because building this school, and Sarah again is absolutely correct, it's up from 97 children to 210. That is a massive increase in the number of children that we can support with this new school, which has now been sitting on the stocks, sadly, for too long. And we need to get on with it, and we need to deliver it. In terms of what's going to happen to the existing Breakspear site, I can't give you a definitive answer, but it is educational site, and I don't believe at this stage that there is any potential to relieve the educational aspect of it on that site, unless anybody has concrete alternative proposals for it.
Thank you very much for that insight, sir. This was the first time I heard of it when I was reading the notes, so that gives me a great background. Moving on to James.
Councillor Wilkie first, Chair, but Councillor Wilkie.
I'm sure you're going to say exactly what I'm going to say, which is, of course, we absolutely agree with your passion for the school, which is why we put it forward, and it went to the IAG. The IAG felt very strongly that this was the right sum of money to put through, and so I would ask the chair and the committee to consider that sum. But you're absolutely right, this does benefit our residents and their children, and like you have an interest, so to speak, because my son goes to Sunnyside, used to go to one of the special educational needs schools, and they are vital. And you're right, you're quite right about the numbers. And the access to legal advice does allow people perhaps with more money to be able to appeal. And the appeal generally, as you say, it's 99%, it's upheld. So I think what we need to do is to really think and consider about our new development as a borough. We're looking we've got great ambitions as an administration. We want to build and develop, and part of that has got to be to support those people that need that support in the borough. And special educational needs is something that is a real target for Herts County Council. Now, I sympathise with them and their funding issues, but we obviously have funding issues of our own, and we felt this was a fair amount. And so, of course, there's nothing to stop Herts County Council coming back to us later and saying, could you contribute to this or that? But at this point, I would ask that we stay at the figure that's proposed. Thank you. James, I don't know if you want to add any comments to that.
May I very briefly respond to that and say I'm comforted by your last comment.
Yes.
But at the same time, there is £20 million sitting there, and we ought to be doing something with it.
And then I've got James, then Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Whiteley.
It's a perfect lead into what I was going to say, actually, because I just wanted to comment about that 20 million. So I'd echo what Councillor Wilkie said about the IAG being very supportive of this, and I think it was a very compelling case for the school. However, members will be later this year receiving the next iteration of the local plan, and with that will become an infrastructure delivery plan, and there'll be some costs associated with that. Now, we'll be delivering infrastructure across the borough through a whole variety of ways and means. A lot of it the developers will be doing themselves, others might be through Section 106 contributions, but some will come from SIL as well. So we will need to look very carefully at what that 20 million does to support that new development. So I think the advice that officers have given to the IAG is that we've got to manage that resource very, very carefully, because we know there's a lot of new development coming down the line which will need support to get delivered. So I think we need to hold that thought. I think there'll be a report later in the year on SIL, Chair, to this committee and to Cabinet as well.
Okay, no, thank you. Councillor Anderson, Councillor Whitelow, and then let's hope we can wrap this.
Yeah, that kind of preempts my question, but I still want to ask you, have the other authorities, are we talking about last amount here, or have the other authorities paid? They've paid?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to turn it into a Dutch auction share and suggest 2/3 was to 50% above 1.3. I'll just put that idea out there, but I do take James's advice that we need money for other things. It's a tricky one.
Very tricky.
We have got a lot coming through, so I think at this point it would be the advisable thing to do. The IAG have agreed it, officers are recommending it, but I absolutely take your point on board, both councillors, and we certainly will. We can consider things in the future, but I think just right now, when we've got Reg 19 coming through, it might be a bit precipitous for us to make decisions on any bigger amounts at this point.
No, and just to invite Joe Marmich as finance guy, but you know, if we get past those worries, you know, and we still find that we've got surplus, could we not make an additional payment another time? So if there was borrowing.
HCC would always take our money, Chair.
Yeah, I'm sure they would.
Chair, the governance is set up, so there would be the opportunity to come back as well. I think the council needs to revisit that, because we've got a new wave of development coming, as I've just alluded to. But you know, it doesn't finally close the door to this, you know, or even how we support the county council more generally, perhaps in a more certain and planned way, rather than this sort of bidding structure which we've got at the moment. But okay, this is what it is at the moment, and that would be good to get this signed off. Thank you.
Waiting very patiently, Councillor Whitelow.
I was listening to my learned colleague at the end there with regard to the funding for this, and I'm just wondering whether this committee in fact can put forward an alternative proposition that in fact we do go back to the original agreed sum to fund the SEN school, which was to whatever it was, millions. And you know, can we do that? Can we put forward a motion that we don't agree with what is being proposed by the officers, and that at this stage we increase the amount of SIL to go towards the provision of an SEN school, which will benefit not only Dacorum residents, but children, young people across the whole of the county. Because the more we invest in them at this level, the actually is a cost saving down the line.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Wilkie.
I think it's incredibly generous of you to suggest it, but this has gone through a very rigorous process with the IAG, and I think we need to respect that process. They have looked at the papers in detail in terms of the contribution that we should be making versus the benefit to our residents. As we said earlier, there is nothing to stop it, and this is something we've agreed with HCC, and trust me, they're very happy that we're giving them the money. So I certainly think that in the future, once we've got through the Reg 19 and we've got a clearer view about the SIL usage that you may want to apply, because it will come before this Scrutiny Committee. I think there'll certainly be an opportunity then to say, right, can we review that? Can we add additional funds? I'm sure HCC would love us to add more money, but right now the proposal made by IAG and officers is for that sum. Thank you so much, Chair. Don't know if you want to add anything to that, James or Diane.
No, it's fine. So, Councillor Mitchell, do you have a question? Do you think?
Well, no, I was just going to add that with, I don't know if I mentioned this being the only Labour councillor in the room, but with the change of government, we're yet to see what's going to happen in terms of SEND funding. I believe there's an intention to put more funding into schools, that SEND provision can also be provided in schools, although I know that some SEND provision is more suitable in a bespoke SEND school.
Right, well, I'm very proud that we're getting through this very much quicker than I thought.
I did ask a question, and
Yes.
I said, was it within the power of this committee to alter the recommendation? And actually nobody answered that.
Did Councillor Wilkie answer that?
No, you didn't. You actually said to what wise counsel.
Would you like to talk to your colleague?
Chair, I can provide an answer if it helps, because I was involved in how the system was set up. The decision is being taken by the portfolio holder as the chair of the Infrastructure Advisory Group. The Scrutiny Committee has just been asked to express an opinion on what the decision was. So, as much as it would be nice to feel that the committee was taking the decision, it's kind of already been taken, and we've just been asked for an opinion.
Doesn't that beg, doesn't that say whether this is in fact to true scrutiny then?
I did answer your question, which was that this had been through the scrutiny process at IAG, and IAG had made a decision, but not to dismiss your proposal. What I'm saying is there's nothing to stop us reviewing this at a later point, and I think you will take a great deal of comfort that once you see the proposals coming through from SIL and how we might want to spend that money, that you didn't commit further at this stage. I think this is, the IAG scrutinised this at very, in much detail, and this is the proposal the IAG is making, this is the proposal I'm making, this is the proposal the officers are making. So that's what we would like your consideration of, if you would, please, Chair.
Yeah, no, fine. And it was the last question, but like 2 questions ago, because I want to move forward.
I'm very new, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, point of clarification here, so I have come in here today to substitute to scrutinise, is that correct?
Yeah.
Great, thank you for the clarification. And the second follow-up to that would be, I would like to just have it minuted that I am unhappy as a councillor that vulnerable children have had money taken away from them to fund a project that we're going into effectively blind. And I understand, I appreciate the powers that be above and the positions that they hold, but it's like putting cards on the table and expecting me to make a decision blind. I like to have things very black and white, and I want to see things in front of me so I can make an informed decision for the future. And whether that's what you want me to say or not, I put my hands up and say I wholeheartedly, authentically want to say that as a councillor, irrespective of the party that I represent. Thank you, Chair.
Fine. I've also been informed that the role of SPAY is to report back to Cabinet. Now, I'm mindful of time, and I did say last question 2 questions ago, so do you mind me trying to wrap this up? Because I think we're all in agreement.
Well, I don't think we are. I don't think we are. I'm sorry, I just think we're here to scrutinise what's before us.
Okay, yes.
And what is before us is something that has been agreed by other people and portfolio holder, but we're here as scrutiny to scrutinise what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And what I perceive is there are a number of us who would say that we have reservations about what we're seeing before us, and therefore our scrutiny would be that we're not happy with certain things.
I absolutely, from what I'm hearing, you have no problem with us giving them 1.4 million.
What we are having
You have no problem with giving them the money. So what you're saying is, can we give them more money?
Well, originally it was more money.
It was, and that was discussed in detail at the IAG And there are representatives at the IAG across chambers and along with officers. And the whole point is that they go into detail about all of this. And they've come back with this figure, and this has been agreed with HCC. So I think at this point, what we can say is the committee agrees that we want to give them this money. What we would like to consider in future is giving them more money. And I think that's something that officers can look at, certainly, but it would have to go through the process of IAG. That's the process to agree SIL money. And what we could have as an unintentional consequence is if we don't agree this funding at this point, all the other funding that is in place for Herts County Council to progress with this all falls apart. So I think we have a grave responsibility here tonight to consider that as well. This is part of a group of decisions, it's just not one party. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah.
Just to kind of clarify, Councillor Wilkie's going to set that out, but in terms of knowing that the role of the SPA from this point of view is to be able to advise and give feedback to the Cabinet. So you're not a decision maker to that point around this being the final decision is with Cabinet. In terms of taking this forward, it could be a suggestion that there's a vote, if you like, on the recommendation which is in the report, which is the, sorry, I haven't got it to the top of my head now, the 1.4 million. But if there is an alternative feedback to Cabinet, then that will be updated verbally to the Cabinet, which is that point about saying, should the recommendation be made either higher at this point or higher in the future? And that is then for the Cabinet to be able to hear that feedback. But I think very much that the role is to scrutinise, as you kind of articulated out. The report is there for reading, to be able to be fully briefed before that scrutiny, and therefore it is then very much the feedback to the Cabinet. But I think there's a key position in the recommendation that the base point of the 1.4 is agreed, and that there's a secondary kind of piece of feedback, that is, if there's a higher position. So I don't know if there's agreement from the whole scrutiny to that, or if that needs to have a vote. I'll leave that with you, Chair, but I think that's Councillor Whitelow's point, is that the base position is there so that that recommendation doesn't fall away, and that 1.4 is proposed to the Cabinet as agreed by scrutiny. There may be a second recommendation which is potentially voted on if needs be, which is, could it be any higher?
No, fine. I'm not going to ignore Councillor Anderson's wisdom any longer.
I was going to simplify things by putting down a proposal that this committee supports the principle of allocating the 1.36 as a minimum, and requests the Cabinet actually considers increasing that amount without actually putting an amount on it. And I hope that can receive the support of colleagues. Seriously? Seriously.
I think that's very reasonable. I think that's very reasonable.
Seriously considers, I'll ask for a seconder, Chair.
What we're agreeing to then is that we're agreeing these funds, yes, and we're asking officers to as part of their, we're asking officers as part of their report back to Cabinet that we consider, well, that's the process, Councillor Anderson, as you're well aware, for officers to mention to the Cabinet that there have been concerns that actually we should consider more funding, and that's something that certainly can come back before us in the future.
I think that can receive the majority of support, Chair. That could be
agreed. Agreed.
Can I just ask for clarification, the wording of what we're agreeing on, just for the minutes and for my own understanding?
We're agreeing the funds that have been asked, that this report, we're agreeing that this report goes to Cabinet. Our added points to the Cabinet are that they will consider at some point that we will relook at funds, additional funds. That's my understanding, Chair.
The proposal from a member of the committee was that the committee supports in principle the allocation proposed for this project, and requests the Cabinet considers increasing, that seriously considers increasing that amount. And that's simple. No, it had to come from a member of the committee, not a portfolio holder.
No, I know. I was just explaining it to the.
Well, I'm on diazepam and cocodamol for pain at the moment, so I can't drive. I'm a little bit slow.
No, it's okay. You're not being slow.
You're doing a great job. Well, let's move forward, and I'm happy to approve that as well. Okay, with your wording.
Yeah,
I can get it off the minutes, but just to update you quickly, because Cabinet is published today, so I'll need to republish the conditions for tomorrow.
You're a gent, sir. You're a gent.
Quick turnaround on this one.
Councillor Gale has been very, very patient because he's been moved down the pecking order as well. So your question.
I mean, it's just an observation that this move looks as though it's going to happen, and we're just being asked to contribute to it, and it looks like it's going to happen whether we give the amount that we've decided or more of an amount. And if we sit here and say, well, we really, really like this project, so we think we should give more, it really needs to be considered properly, because the IAG has actually considered the amount that it ought to give, and it's quite surprising, having heard many years of lectures about prudence in economics and spending, that suddenly now we get a project that we really like, we suddenly just decide we just want to give more without actually thinking of it through. I'm very happy obviously for it to be given serious consideration, of course, and Cabinet certainly ought to consider more. But just because we really like something, it seems a little strange to just go against what's actually been recommended with proper consideration and calculation, just because we really like it.
No, I'm actually sorry, if I may, Chair, very briefly. I'm referring back to the original decision. I've not plucked that figure out of the air. That money was there when the original recommendation was made in 2023, and that is why I've gone back to that one. I haven't just sort of, because I think it's a whim. I'm basing it on the discussion.
That was the application.
But as far as I'm concerned now, I'm happy with the recommendation that my colleague, Councillor Anderson, has come forward with. But I did want to clarify that point, Jonathan.
Just to be clear, because I don't want there to be a misunderstanding amongst members, we are not asking you to agree the sum that would be for Cabinet. What we're asking you to do is to say, yes, this should go to Cabinet with your comments. And your comments are, we'd like Cabinet to think about giving more money, which I'm sure Cabinet will consider. But I should also mention that the IAG was set up by your administration, by Councillor Anderson, I believe, actually. And so that is a very, it's an agreed process that allows the members across chambers and for experts there. So we have Nigel Howcutt, for example, portfolio holders, chair members, to be able to look at it in detail. And this is the recommendation they have come up with. So that's what we'll be going forward with. But I absolutely accept that you would like the Cabinet to consider more funds in the future.
Okay, well, we've all agreed on that, I hope now.
Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you. Okay, so am I right moving forwards to the parking solutions? Is that?
That's right, Chair.
Page 79.
Just get on the right page. I'll hand over to you, sir. And there's some sweets going around. If anyone wants a sweet to keep their sugar levels up, please feel free. It's all part of the service.
Parking Solutions is the new name that we've given to what was previously called the Verge Hardening Programme, and that's obviously the Verge Hardening Programme was running in Decorum for some while. So from 2016 to 2022, there were 65 schemes delivered, and the scheme was suspended at that point. Currently, there's a budget of 1.21 million within the Council Capital Programme, which is spread over 3 years. I've had lots of correspondence from most of you here, so there is an increasing number of requests for schemes for additional parking. And just to give you an idea, there's currently 81 schemes on the long list. 47 of these have come in 2023 and 2024 alone. Majority of requests are coming from now within Hemel Hempstead, so there's a possible link between the layout of the new town and the fact that car ownership has probably outstripped how it was perceived when the design was made. And the policy will not necessarily be able to deliver solutions to resolve all the issues that residents are seeking to exist, so it should note that. So under the proposed policy, so what's covered and what's not covered, it's envisaged the policy covers highway land within DBC, subject to agreement with Herts County Council, and open land owned by DBC, so whether residential or non-residential. Principles of the new policy are this policy aims to secure best use of the available budget in a way that is most cost effective, not only for solving the specific issues identified in requests, but also supporting the council's overall aspirations and goals for the borough. There are 8 guiding principles behind the new policy, so I can quickly run through these. So those 8 guiding principles are: requests should be dealt with appropriately and consistently and follow a design process which is set out within this policy. The process should allow for existing requests to be considered, so all those 81 schemes as well as any new requests that may come in over time. Spend should be on the basis of need and cost effectiveness within the available budget, not first come, first served. It should be possible to prioritise the most promising schemes easily and quickly for feasibility study, while recognising some may need more detailed investigation. The policy and prioritisation aim to balance sometimes competing goals of meeting parking needs while also maintaining environmental quality and ensuring safety. It should not only reflect the specific needs and issues at that location, but also the council's wider aspirations and goals for the community. So particularly relevant to the borough's the net zero goals and supporting travel change behaviour. Parking solutions should be pursued if it's the right solution to the identified parking problem. And additional spaces created on the programme will normally be managed as part of the overall parking supply. So it's not envisaged under this that individual people will be given parking spaces as a result. I think it's worth noting what's out of scope. So pavement parking is out of scope of this policy. And the council's approach to parking for blue badge holders, cycle parking, off-street car parks, dedicated lorry parking, and landowners where landowners other than DBC are proposing parking solutions on their own land. Locations that require land owned by private landowners, and locations that require existing developed or paved land, such as repurposing existing car parks or garages, and parking provision for new developments, so that should be covered by planning policy, and parking provision for commuters. There is a decision-making process, but for a scheme to proceed to the prioritisation scheme, it needs to get a yes in the first 3 steps. And then the prioritisation, so there are nine criteria where we will score. So it's 9 criteria, but maximum score within that is 24, which will allow us to prioritise the scheme. So first scheme is, what is the level of parking stress, in particular how frequent, how serious is any environmental damage, obstruction, congestion or safety issue that it causes? Are there spare spaces available nearby? People could choose but are not choosing to. So is there somewhere round the corner that people want to park outside their house? How much parking space is there already compared to what would be expected in that type of area? What will the environmental impact be? How deliverable is the location? What is the likely level of public and stakeholder support? Does the site have potential for alternative uses in the future? What is the likely whole life carbon impact of verge hardening here or of a solution? And does the site support local shops and businesses? And then in terms of just wrapping up, in terms of risk management, at some points we will need to consider. So we've got 81 schemes. Realistically, the council's not going to be able to deliver solutions at all of those. There were some schemes that were progressed to the point of implementation under the old scheme, so it's proposed that all schemes, regardless of previous progress, are reassessed under the new criteria, under the criteria in this new policy. We're getting a lot of requests for solutions adjacent to areas where new housing developments are being constructed, so we will need to address that. And it's some schemes are likely to require Herts County Council support.
Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mitchell.
First of all, I'd just like to say well done for creating such a comprehensive policy. And there's obviously been a lot of hard work gone into that. I'd just like to point out, it was mentioned in the policy, but the involvement of ward councillors and the close involvement of ward councillors is critical, because there's no one that knows the issues better than the ward councillor other than the residents themselves. And also with the 81 cases that you already have, how are you going to start work on an approval of them, and how are you going to put those into order of review?
There is project management, there's funding within the budget for project manager, which we're looking to start recruiting soon, so that once the policy is adopted, we can get going. But that person will be sent out to go and assess all 81 schemes, so they've got a busy couple of months, so we can start putting together a proper list that can be scrutinised if necessary.
Yeah, it'd be really good, or I'd be very welcome to meet the project manager when he comes on site to be able to talk through the issues that have been reported to me.
Councillor Duris.
Ian,
Yes.
you said pretty much at the end, you were referencing really legacy applications. Could I suggest that you add to the criteria that those legacy applications which have got to the point of having a design applied to them be prioritised for consideration under this new process?
Could you explain what that means to me? Because I've got no idea.
No, I know what it means. Ian knows what it means, and that will do.
Well, just to
basically, what it was
saying.
let me explain. What it means is that I have got a site where a design was created for, as it was, off-street parking, verge parking, if you like, want to call it that, under the previous regime in terms of management. And what I'm saying is, and there was a design for it, so there has been some expense made for it in doing this, rather than losing that.
So what is needed to be done to the ground for cars to go on it, or is it a planning?
What has been done to the ground? Yes, right. the design, rather than losing the cost that has already been applied to that particular or any of those particular projects, they be picked up and prioritised in the consideration.
Well, it's definitely worth noting, but if work has already been done on them, and I would have thought that if they were previously prioritised to the extent that money was spent on detailed design, then the criteria that we've got would mostly bring them up that list anyway.
If that's what you're saying, which isn't, I don't think, what I heard from Ian, and I saw the head move, then I would argue that I would agree with you and that should be included, and you can move your head again.
Did you want to respond?
We've made it all now. I mean, I can take a recommendation back that if within the prioritisation scheme, there is a score that can be applied to that to say it was previously, was there a scheme previously designed? Yes, no. If yes, it scores X. If no, just to kind of, I suppose, even it up a little bit, because there are a lot of, I've been to look at some schemes and there are some fairly major problems that need dealing with. So, but yeah, I can certainly take that feedback on.
Well, certainly you don't want to throw any information away. So if there's work that's been done, they may have been rejected for very good reasons. So we need to just consider those aspects.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Mitchell.
I just wanted to endorse Councillor Duris's suggestion, because I had a scheme in my ward which was just waiting for DEFRA authorisation. It had been designed, worked up, costed the works. It just needed that okay from the government department. So I too would like to see that prioritised, because I don't think we should be probably that close to completion with hanging in the wind.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mitchell, and I've got a question of my own.
I tend to disagree because this is a fair process that Ian has created and it's got new criteria, and I think everything needs to go through that process again, unless there's physical works being carried out. But if it's just to the design point, I think we've got to, if we're treating different cases differently, then we're not following due process and following all the criteria necessarily, because the criteria now is going to possibly be different.
Okay, thank you. I have more of a dumb question really. I'm sorry, did you got any response to that, Ian?
Yes, Chair. I think what we can simply do is, taking the point, Councillor Mitchell, we do have this policy now created and this criteria is created, but what we can do is we can start perhaps looking at how we can score those projects that have been already worked on. So effectively, we can prioritise the kind of screening with those projects using this criteria. So we're not really creating any unfairness. We just effectively just you need to start somewhere with the screening, and maybe we can start with this. So that would be my suggestion. But
yeah, I think that's fair, as long as it goes through the same process and meets the same criteria.
I also have one very quick question, Chair.
Go on.
I have read the agenda, speed read it very fast. Can I just check whether additional funding from other sources is a criteria that's considered?
I mean, there is an existing budget, I think.
You've got third-party organisations offering money. Does that help?
I hadn't envisaged that under the policy. I suppose, yeah, I suppose that affects. Then comes back to whether almost.
It's not money.
Yeah.
It's not driven by money, isn't it?
No.
I think what we need to make sure is the criteria have been designed to actually assess the need and to be a bit more strategic on the wider reasons of the scheme and also the impact that the scheme might have.
Yeah.
So it's not driven by money, it's driven by criteria that we've designed. However, that could facilitate, absolutely can facilitate.
Because if you've got a residents association in Hemel or a parish council out of Hemel offering pump prime funding, so 5, 10,000 or even £15,000, that surely should count for something, Chair.
But I think if, for example, we do have a pot that is not, it's not going to last forever. So potentially we might have a situation where we might have more schemes that are actually, according to the criteria, that they're okay to progress with. Perhaps we haven't got enough money. In that case, obviously that facilitation would help in accelerating the delivery, because we do know that by assessing the 80+ schemes, we might say we've got enough money for, I don't know, 40, but 60 went through the criteria. What do we do with the other 20? So I think in terms of that additional money can help perhaps funding the rest. So that would be my thinking. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I suppose it's a little bit, if I think you've got parish councils that are outside, it's whether they then, because they've got funding, prioritise other schemes that may be in more need of delivery under the prioritisation system. I think there's a bit where we come to go, we've got these schemes, there should be, as part of the due diligence, is there alternative funding that we can pull in under the prioritisation scheme that will make the money go further? If that, yeah.
I've got a quick question, and it's Councillor Whitelow and Councillor Gale. I'm just winding everything back to the start of this process. Who identifies where it's needed? Is it a councillor? Is it who? How are these been built up in the past?
I think it's a combination of councillor requests. I've had correspondence from former MP Mike Penning and primarily, but also there are members of the public that write into us. So quite regularly, it really does vex some people, and I can imagine it really affects their mental health as well. So that we can appease it. Yeah.
When it first started, it was primarily councillors.
Yeah.
It was a council decision to set aside capital funding for third childing, as it was called then, and because councillors set it up, particularly certainly those in Hemel wards like Benny's End, for example, It was the councillors that made the proposals as to where the sites were. I don't believe there were very many public suggestions. It was purely ward councillors.
And over how many years had this list been built up? Is it over a number of years?
This is certainly
Very long time.
a long time.
Yeah, no, good. No, thank you. Councillor Whitelow.
Very briefly, Chair. Because this is a new policy, but we also have a legacy of schemes that have been waiting for an awful long time, put forward by the councillors in many cases, but also asked for by local residents. And local residents know that the schemes have been put forward on their behalf. And I'm just wondering whether we have perhaps a more flexible transitional approach that will help deal with some of those very long-standing requests. I mean, years and years, because councillors will have said, yeah, I've put it on the list and, it's going to be coming forward soon. And it actually devalues it if the councillors then have to turn around now and say, actually, I'm really sorry, but it now doesn't fit the criteria and it's not on the list at all. So could I argue for a little bit of flexibility in this transitional phase where you are dealing with a legacy list and new requests that come?
No, I think it's a very good point. But if you don't mind me adding, it looks like this waiting list has built up over many years, and great progress is starting to eventually take place.
Well, I'm just curious because I only became a councillor just over a year ago, so I don't know the history of this. But I was always a bit puzzled about why, if there were sites that were identified and they were planned for, and there was budget available, which has been accumulating for the last few years, why the previous administration didn't do it.
That's a misunderstanding. What the previous administration did is set aside capital funding, not revenue. So that's one-off money. Now, whenever money was spent, it might have put more money in to replace that capital that was spent, but it wasn't being run like a revenue budget. So it's not like things weren't happening even though there was money for them. It was a case of basically officers being overloaded by hundreds of suggestions and having to prioritise. That was what was holding the project back. And then ultimately we actually lost the officer that ran that project and weren't able to replace her. That's the reason why the project, sort of like 3 years ago, kind of fell into abeyance.
So historically, between 2016 and 2022, there were 65 schemes that were delivered. So there was quite a significant delivery during that period.
Thank you. Councillor Gale and Councillor Mitchell.
I mean, I think this report's really good. It's really thorough, and it's very important that this is done in a transparent and principled way, with the strategic planning implications in mind, with our long-term plan in mind. And I would suggest that this is adopted sooner rather than later, and that we don't cause a lot of confusion with a whole load of transitional provisions and a whole load of money, and money suddenly becoming an issue. It should be based on principle, not on whether there's money behind it, certainly.
Councillor Mitchell.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that, as it says in the policy, that there is a finite pot of money and schemes should be reviewed on need and suitability, which is what it says in the policy. Some councillors in some wards have been maybe slightly inactive, shall we say, and it's not fair on those residents who have had inactive councillors not putting their plights forward. Everyone has been suffering for the same amount of time. The parking stress has been there for everyone who is in that situation for the same amount of time. Whether a ward councillor chose to take those issues forward and add them to the list is a different matter. And there were some wards where that didn't happen and the residents weren't supported in that way, and it's not fair for them to be disadvantaged, and this should be a fair process.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other questions? Am I right in assuming that we are happy to support this policy's adoption? Yeah, is that unanimous? Yep. Marvellous. Now, I will just open this up for honesty with everyone, how they're feeling, and are we comfortable still leaving that item, or is it a quick one? Have we got the energy, and is it?
I have a view, Chair.
Oh, you're so cut up. You'll get 3 bags of sweets next time I do this. Thank you. So thank you very much for your timekeeping. We've covered a lot, and if we move on to the last officer then report, is there a summary to go with it, Sarah, or is it?
Pretty much happy to take the report as read.
Yep.
For anybody who wants just a very brief overview, it's a voluntary development quality charter that Hertfordshire County Council, and in particular their Herts Growth Board, has drafted. And you can see that they hope that a number of developers will sign up to it. So it is something that we will use throughout our planning policy discussions. It will not be a statutory piece of policy, and 5 other Hertfordshire authorities have already signed up to it. So I think it's a positive story. It's going to be able to take through our committees, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
I support it in principle, Chair. I have a slight reservation, historical, that this might have been an attempt by the Hertfordshire County Council to apply a standard across the whole county, with a view to merging all 10 local planning authorities, but that was a rather extreme and carried away thought, and I'm happy to support it in principle, Chair.
I had a question, which is probably a very stupid question, but I'm allowed one every meeting, I'm told. Could this increase the cost of the houses and have a detrimental effect to house prices of people that are trying to live in decorum?
So paragraph 5.3 goes through any financial implications. It could do, depending on the actual kind of proposals. I think at this point it would be negligible. So David Barrett, who's the Assistant Director for Housing Development, he's actually gone through it on some of his own schemes and found that it would be very negligible, and it wouldn't actually have a higher cost because of the way that things are progressing throughout the built environment. So building regulations have increased, and actually they have increased fairly substantially already. So it's a voluntary item. If a developer feels like they want to comply with the charter, but it's going to have an impact on the viability of their scheme and it's going to push up house prices, they don't have to. It is completely voluntary, and I think it's an aspirational policy from a design and a sustainability point of view. So it should not, prejudice anybody being able to kind of purchase homes, etc. It should be absorbed very much in that development industry piece.
I think a lot of developers, Chair, would actually welcome this as a sort of, not a badge of honour, that's a horrible expression that gets used, but it's what I'm trying to say, that they can actually demonstrate that they want to build attractive buildings that people want to buy. And I think this is just a mechanism by which they can put a badge on it to prove that it's attractive. So I think developers would actually welcome it, and I personally wouldn't actually fear what you're worrying about there, to be honest.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor Doris.
I think the very essence of this particular design is that we are, and I can't remember who introduced the expression, but we are building homes for the future. And we're building homes that are going to last and be sustainable, both in terms of their operation, their design, and their outlook, and the amenity and the environment in which people live. So I commend this absolutely.
I just, whilst I do endorse the principles of this, and when you see the pictures, it all looks really attractive. But the reality, when it gets delivered, often as not, as we've seen, is very big, large blocks, which don't look, to my mind, particularly attractive as things. When you see the pictures here, they look attractive, separate houses and everything. So are we talking about the same thing when we're looking at this? And my other issue is that mentioning again something about biodiversity net gain, which I do have an issue with as to how you achieve that. I mean, that obviously isn't developed here at all. It's just given that these are pledges to deliver it. Sustainability, I completely get that these things have to be sustainable and using minimum heating and everything else. But I do have an issue about what we see is not what we get.
So in terms of biodiversity net gain, that is in the pledge, but it's also now formalised in legislation. So that is a requirement throughout the planning process of a 10%. And the way it's delivered, there's a whole kind of orchestrated means of delivery behind that. In terms of the design and the photographs and the examples and used in the brochure, some of those actually are in decorum. And the point then that you're kind of alluding to in terms of what's granted planning permission and then what's actually constructed can be challenges on some sites. And I think with this charter, that would only go towards helping that rather than hindering that. I can't say that it means that any proposal won't then change throughout its duration of construction. But I think in terms of being able to look to this charter as a position that states that Dacorum Borough Council committees and kind of as a whole, has a high level, a high bar for design within its authority. It's a helpful piece for officers to be able to point to, and it's a helpful piece to support Hertfordshire Growth Board to seek that.
Well, I hope it does come out as interesting design. Only all I can say is what I happen to have seen up to date does not look like that. And I also, you talked about biodiversity net gain, but you have not explained what that is. And actually, I think putting up a few bat boxes and boxes for bird nesting and so on is not biodiversity net gain. I don't expect you to tell me and explain here and now, because I have an issue with it throughout. Wherever you see biodiversity net gain, and it's never actually explained, because I personally think, in terms of taking over a field with hedges and things, that the chances of having any biodiversity net gain, when you put a lot of houses and people and lights and noise, is very unlikely.
Chair, could I suggest that we merge into the next item on the agenda, the work programme? We have two additional items, one to examine biodiversity net gain. The other one I know is close to Councillor Timothy's heart at the moment, and that's SANG briefing.
Yes.
It would be very helpful.
Yes, please.
Okay, noted.
Noted.
Okay.
That's my hard work.
Okay. Any other questions on this, or should we just go straight forward to an agreement that we want to proceed with signing the charter? Agreed. And well, there's me getting excited. I thought that's the last one, but I forgot about the work programme. But are we right in thinking that we take those 2 points noted? I know I do have a meeting next week, I believe. To cover agendas and what's included. I thank everyone for their patience. Yeah.
Yes, sir, at that meeting, Chair, we'll need to discuss the forward plan and items in my service area that's moved over from the other scrutiny committee.
Okay.
So we need to.
I will look forward to that very much, and especially as Claire is returning from a holiday.
Yeah, it's usually a good thing to win over officers, Chair, by suggesting that you have alternate one night for planning and another night for environment. So then they don't have to attend every meeting. That's how you make friends when you're doing those meetings.
Are we talking about? Yeah, we've got PCE to cover that as well.
Good call.
From the previous chair, good advice, Chair.
No, thank you. Is that it? Have we got through it?